When Sandra arrived from the village, the whole compound seemed to pause and look at her. She stepped down from the rusty bus with a faded bag on her shoulder and a wrapper tied around her waist. Her skin glowed under the afternoon sun, and her full figure turned heads without her even trying. Men at the roadside kiosk lowered their voices as she passed. Women watched too, some with pity, some with caution. Sandra noticed all of it. She had always known she was beautiful, and in her heart, beauty had begun to feel like a weapon. Her aunt, Auntie Biola, welcomed her with hands and tired eyes. She had no child of her own, and though her house was not the biggest on the street, it stood proud among the others, painted cream, with blue window frames and a balcony above the front door. To Sandra, it looked like another world. Inside were polished tiles, soft chairs wrapped in lace, a humming refrigerator, and curtains that smelled of soap and comfort. Sandra took one look around and knew immediately that she did not want to go back to village life. While helping in the kitchen, she listened as Auntie Biola spoke kindly to her. "You will stay here, walk with me, and behave yourself," her aunt said. "If you are patient, this city can help you." Sandra nodded, but deep inside, patience was not what she wanted. She wanted change. She wanted wigs, perfumes, gold slippers, and the kind of respect that makes people rise when you enter a room. She did not want to scrub another woman's floor forever. Then she saw him. Her uncle, Uncle Tond, came in from work with his shirt sleeves folded and his car keys in his hand. He was tall, clean, and carried himself with the ease of a man used to being respected. He greeted his wife, washed his hands, and thanked Sandra for the food she served him. That simple thank you sat strangely in her chest. She looked up for 1 second too long, and something dangerous flickered through her mind. This house had comfort. This house had money. This house had no child. And this man was the center of it all. From that evening, a seed was planted. Sandra began her duties the next morning, but her eyes were no longer innocent. As she swept the sitting room, she imagined herself dressed like the mistress of the house, not the maid. As she washed plates, she pictured guests greeting her with respect. She watched the way her aunt moved, the way her uncle listened, and the way their marriage rested on trust. To Sandra, trust looked weak. And beauty like hers, she believed, could break it. When she went to bed on her mattress in the boys' quarters, she smiled into the darkness. She had come to the city as a maid. But in her heart, Sandra had started planning how to become madam. By Sandra's second week in the city, the house had become familiar, but her intentions had changed. She had learned the sound of every door, the time her aunt watered the flowers, and the hour Uncle Ton returned from work. She also noticed something else: Auntie Biola trusted her too easily. That trust should have humbled Sandra, but instead it made her bold. She began to believe the house was already opening itself to her. She started small. When serving food, she would place Uncle Ton's plate before anyone else's and bend just a little longer than necessary. When he asked for water, she answered too softly. When he thanked her, she smiled as if his words meant more than simple kindness. None of it was open enough to be accused, yet none of it was innocent either. Sandra enjoyed walking near the edge of danger without falling in. At first, Uncle Ton ignored it. He told himself she was just a village girl trying too hard to impress. But Sandra kept pushing. She began changing into tighter wrappers in the evenings and finding excuses to enter the sitting room whenever he was alone. Once, she laughed too loudly at something he did not even mean as a joke. Another time, she stood too close while collecting his empty cup. He stepped back and frowned, but still said nothing. His silence became another door Sandra felt she could test. Auntie Biola began to notice the little things. Sandra was suddenly eager whenever her husband needed anything. She washed his face too much. Her footsteps always seemed to appear when Biola stepped out. One afternoon, Beulah returned quietly from the backyard and found Sandra smoothing her hair in the hallway mirror just before Tom came downstairs. Their eyes met in the reflection. Sandra quickly lowered her hand and pretended to dust the wall frame, but the moment stayed in Beulah's chest like a stone. That night, Beulah lay awake beside her husband and listened to his breathing. She wanted to dismiss her fear, but wisdom would not let her sleep. A young woman may hide her words, the elders say, but her eyes will still tell the truth. From then on, Beulah stopped seeing Sandra as only her niece. She started watching her as a woman watches smoke rising from behind her kitchen, knowing that somewhere, something had already begun to burn. Auntie Beulah did not confront Sandra immediately. She was not the kind of woman who scattered her thoughts like grain for chickens. She carried her suspicions quietly, turning them over in her mind until they felt solid enough to hold. The more she watched, the more certain she became that Sandra was no longer behaving like a niece under guidance. There was calculation in her smiles now, and impatience in the way she looked around the house, as if measuring curtains, chairs, and even the marriage itself. So Beulah decided that if truth wanted to hide, wisdom would drag it into the light. One Thursday morning, she announced loudly that she had to travel to Ibadan for an overnight family burial. She packed a small bag where Sandra could see it, gave instructions for the kitchen, and reminded her husband to eat on time. Sandra acted surprised at first, but the excitement that flashed across her face was too quick to hide. Beulah saw it. She said nothing. She simply kissed her husband goodbye, stepped into a taxi, and left the gate like a woman going on a normal journey. But she did not go far. Instead, she went to Mama Soda's shop at the end of the street, where two older women from the compound already sat waiting. They had noticed Sandra's behavior too, and when Beulah quietly shared her fears, they agreed to help her witness the truth with clean eyes. From there, they kept watch until evening, careful, patient, and silent. Inside the house, Sandra moved differently the moment she believed her aunt was gone.